Hello, I'm Dr. Winston York. I'm a software engineer, but I'm also very interested in voting and election systems. This fall, where I live, British Columbia is holding a referendum on whether or not to adopt proportional representation in the place of first past the post. I'm making this series of videos to help voters, particularly conservative voters like myself, make an informed decision about how to vote in this important referendum. Last time, I argued that proportional representation would decentralize power. It would take power away from political parties. However, a lot of people would make the opposite argument. They would argue that proportional representation brings more power to political parties. This is essentially because proportional representation changes the way representation works. The theory of our current system is that we elect a representative for a particular area, and that representative represents everyone in the riding. So they will actually listen to their voters, even the voters who voted against them, and in theory represent all of those ideas when they go to the legislature. However, it's somewhat dubious that this actually works, because how well can you actually represent someone who voted against you, particularly when you're largely forced to follow the party line? Proportional representation would say this doesn't make any sense. You can't really represent people who voted against you. As such, you should really be represented by someone that you supported, that would actually adhere to your political ideals. So in any of the proportional systems under evaluation, you would still have some sort of local representative. But there would actually be multiple people you could identify as your representative. And the primary way you would be represented in proportional system would actually be through the political party you supported. Because what happens is that every vote you cast for a political party increases the number of seats they have. So your primary voice in the government isn't through your local representative, it's actually through the party you voted for. This means that switching to proportional representation would be a transfer from a situation where you have one local representative to where you have multiple political representatives representing you in the legislature. A common complaint here is that under the current system you get to choose your MLA, but under proportional representation that choice would be made by parties. But this is pretty much entirely mistaken. You don't get to choose your MLA today. You cast a vote, you probably voted against your MLA or only voted for them while holding your nose. You probably preferred somebody else. And you don't really have a choice unless you could actually choose someone else, and you can't. All you could do is cast a ballot to try and change that decision. Under proportional representation, you actually do choose the party your MLA comes from. You choose the party that represents you. Now, you may not have as much of a choice as you might like over the exact MLA who's going to represent your views, but you do have a choice of the party, and that's much better than you have under first past the post. Furthermore, even if you did get to choose your MLA, the party's still controlling the nomination process. And parties frequently put people in safe seats who they really want to ensure get into the government. So you don't have this free-range imaginary choice of your MLA that's being proposed here. So yes, it's true, under proportional representation, people are going to elect it in some other way than winning a particular local riding. But the thing is, that's going to have a nomination process just like we have a nomination process for the ridings today. And there's no reason to think that would be any more or less democratic than under the current scenario. Under first past the post, what you're doing is you're evaluating which party you want to put into government, and you're voting for that party. And more or less, the most popular party wins, and we put them in government. Under proportional representation, you're not really evaluating the government because you don't get to choose what the government is. Instead, what you're doing is you're delegating your vote. You're delegating the choice of how to actually vote and how to participate in this negotiation processes to that party. The way I see it, first past the post makes us all politicians. We all have to decide how to compromise and negotiate with other people in order to figure out what form of government should be taken. And that's really what you're doing when you're voting in a first past the post system and you're trying to make a strategic decision. You're really being a politician and you're making a strategic decision in terms of trying to negotiate with other people. Under proportional representation, you're not required to be the politician. You're delegating that to the politicians, the people who have the expertise and the background to actually do that effectively. In the end, this comes back to the fundamental difference between proportional representation and first past the post. In first past the post, the coalitions are already formed before the election, and you're voting on which coalition you want to put into power. In proportional representation, the coalition isn't made yet, and you're actually choosing your delegate the person who's going to represent your views during the making of that negotiation process. And I think that actually puts you in a more powerful and controlling position. You're actually negotiating and have control over the actual setup of the government, rather than simply choosing a few prepackaged options that the political parties have decided to put before you. So the question is this: do you, as under first past the post, want to cast a ballot on potential governments and not necessarily be represented by someone of even the party of your choice? Or do you, as under proportional representation, want to pick a party of your choice to represent you while foregoing your ability to cast a ballot directly on the government that forms?